When you bring on an employee, you've hired an awesome Dr. Sabrina to help you find somebody, or you've worked hard and interviewed hundreds and you've finally got somebody. I want you to equate that mentally in your business to bringing on a new client.
You're listening to the Profit by Design podcast, episode 9. You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling, the business psychologist, the author of How to Hire the Best, and your co-host on the Profit by Design podcast. Weekly, my co-host, Mike Bruno, and I bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests, who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real-life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. Hey, Profit Designers, welcome back. I have some exciting news to share with you. In this past week, the Profit by Design podcast has been downloaded more than 1,000 times. So we've passed that 1,000 download milestone, which is a big one for a brand new podcast. And we know that you, our listeners, are very much responsible for this because you have been sharing this podcast with your friends. Mike and I so appreciate that. We know you've been telling people about it. We've seen you talk about it in social media. I've even heard some of you tell me that you are showing some friends how to find podcasts on their phone because, quite honestly, there's still about 40-something% of the population that's not aware of what a podcast is or how to listen to one. So those of you who've gone that extra mile and done that, we really appreciate it. So to celebrate you, our listeners, Mike and I are giving away t-shirts. We are giving away Profit by Design podcast t-shirts. We have a contest going on. We will put a link to enter the contest in the show notes. And this is one of those contests where the more times you enter, the more you share the Profit by Design podcast in social media, the more chances you have to win one of the 3 Profit by Design podcast t-shirts. And when you win, you get to pick. Do you want a black one or a pink one? So it'll be a lot of fun. We will announce the winners on next week's episode. So stay tuned to find out if you win a Profit by Design podcast t-shirt. Our community is growing, and I want to welcome a few members who have joined the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group. So welcome Natalie Flowers, Andy, Peggy, and Andrew Tardzik, and Elizabeth Ackley. We're so glad you're here with us. And in our Profit by Design podcast Facebook group, we really want this to be a place where we can continue the conversation with you. As you're listening to the podcast, we know it's triggering ahas and insights, and there's things that you're relating to. We want you to come into the Facebook group and share it so we can all have a conversation about these things. And to that extent, we've had some listener feedback on a couple of episodes that I want to share with you. So episode 6 with Donna Lyons, Andrea Walker said, it's a great episode, worthy of listening multiple times. Mike Chavalino said business owners should probably bottle this episode if they want a blueprint for growth. So if you haven't listened to episode 6 yet with Donna Lyons, it's probably one you want to go back and listen to. And then in terms of more listener feedback that we've had, Dr. Jenny Byrne shared with me that she was listening to our podcast on her drive to a conference, and it was the perfect thing that she needed to hear that day. So Mike and I are so happy that what we shared was helpful to you, Dr. Jenny. And then Christine Era has been listening to the podcast while she's working out. I love that we're part of her workout. And so we want to hear from you guys about how these podcasts are fitting in your lives, the mindset shifts that are happening for you. And again, any conversations and discussion topics that you want Mike and I to take up on future episodes, the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group is the best place to tell us about those things. Hey, Profit Designers. In just a moment, you're going to get to listen in on a conversation between myself and Rhamy Alejeal. Now, Rhamy and his wife, Elizabeth, are the owners of Poplar Financial, a provider of integrated, automated HR processes. Rhamy and his team work with hundreds of companies across the United States, helping them learn how to stop pushing paper and start prioritizing people. So right away, you can tell probably why I wanted to get Rhamy on the podcast. He's going to talk to us all about how to make a great experience for our employees, especially during the onboarding process. So something else that I think you would be interested in knowing about Rhamy is that he serves on the Federal Reserve's Industry Council on Healthcare, providing insights into employer costs and how they affect businesses in today's marketplace. He holds a bachelor's degree in financial economics and an MBA with a focus on economics. His book, which just came out, is called People Processes, and it was an Amazon #1 bestseller in the HR category and one of Inc.com's top 10 leadership books in 2018. So Rhamy, I'm really excited that we're getting the opportunity to sit down and talk here. I got to hear you speak at ProfitCon, and then I came up and introduced myself to you because I was so excited about what you shared with us at ProfitCon. And the reason I got so excited is that we have so many of our profit designers in our audience who are business owners who are dedicated to creating great places to work. And as you know from the work that you do, that's a challenge when you're a small business and you're growing rapidly, right? There's so many factors that come into play. So you shared, what you do and what your mission is to help business owners with this and to really change the experience that team members have as they're coming into a business and as they stay there. So I want to just kind of turn it over to you and let you share a little bit about what you do and why you're so passionate about what you do, because you're very passionate.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sabrina. I do. I love my job. I somehow or another knew that I would be in insurance and benefits and HR and payroll and all that since I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the industry. My mother and my grandmother were in this world, and I love it. I got a bachelor's and a master's degree so that I could, play in HR. Not many kids had that when they were growing up, and I was very lucky to.
So I want to pause right there and ask you, because I heard you talk about this at ProfitCon. You have a really fun story about when you were a kid and you helped. It was your grandmother, right?
Yeah. My biological father died when I was very young, and my mother and my grandmother really raised me until I was about 7 when my mother remarried. And I just loved my grandmother, spent a ton of time with her, and she was an insurance agent. She sold Medicare supplements. So that's the health insurance for people over 65 who go on Medicare. And it was, at the time, I just thought, she's my grandmother. I don't, of course she can take off at 2:00 every day to pick me up from school. And of course I can, spend whatever time I wanted with her because she's a grandmother. But in retrospect, she was like, 45 or whatever and had managed to really structure her life in such a way that she had the freedom to help out with her grandson. I wanted to spend the night with her during the week. I could only do it on the weekends, but during the week she wouldn't let me because she had to cold call to set up appointments to talk to people about Medicare supplements. And around the time I was 13, I just got fed up with not being able to spend the night during the week. And I said, I'll cold call with you. Let me do it. I'll cold call for you. Let me hang out Tuesdays and Thursday nights. It's going to be a party. And I'll cold call. And of course, my grandmother did not expect that to go well and did not expect a 13-year-old, very introverted, very nerdy young man to want to do that. So she put a bunch of tasks in my way. She gave me 26 cassette tapes to listen to, about how to call over the phone, how to overcome objections. And then she gave me the insurance licensing 3-ring binder that's like, 6 inches deep. And said, you got to read all that. And of course, 2 weeks later, I read it all and I loved it. I said, oh, this is great. And I started cold calling and it went really, really well. It turns out a 13-year-old calling 65-year-olds saying, my grandmother wants to meet with you to talk about Medicare. I mean, it's just gold. It just set every appointment. It was a wonderful time. And for that whole time, for years, that's what I did on Tuesdays and Thursdays and sometimes on Saturdays. I would call and set appointments. And ever since then, I've kind of always knew that I wanted to be in the insurance world. It had done very well for my family. And when I was 22, my wife and I started Poplar Financial. It's a business that does employee benefits. It just focuses on the benefits for companies like major medical and dental and vision and 401ks. And over time, over the last 10 years, that's really changed and grown to being less about the product of benefits and more about the overall structure in HR around those benefits. So we acquired a payroll company, we acquired an HR company, and now we really provide a unified world of HR where we focus on the systems and processes and the pieces that go inside those systems and processes to create a good employee experience so you can attract and retain really good people. And that's what we do now.
Yeah. So now you're speaking my language. So,
yeah.
As you're telling the story about the conversations you were having with these elderly folks about Medicare, what I'm really struck by is what was so effective is you broke down a barrier that your grandmother herself was struggling to break down because she was just calling to sell something to them. Here they're on the phone with you and you're like, my grandmother wants to talk to you. Would you talk to my grandmother? All of a sudden, the friction in that part of the establishing the relationship is removed. And I want to draw a tie to that because that's so much what you do now for business owners with their team members, especially during the onboarding process, but really about all phases that a team member is going to have in a business. And you've written a book called People Processes, and I've been reading it. And one of the things that really strikes me is you go into great detail about all the things we business owners need to be paying attention to in the onboarding and the whole life cycle that a team member has with us. And you point out, you tell really good stories and clear case examples of how when our systems break down, when there's little oversights that happen, how that plays out and creates one episode of friction after another with our team members. And it's those micro episodes of friction with our team members that undermine everything we're trying to do to create a great place to work. So can you talk some about that?
I appreciate you saying that. I think the thing that people have trouble wrapping their head around is that your employees have a job that they're doing that is probably primarily externally focused. They're to do bookkeeping. They're there to handle something with a client. They're to do maintenance, but it's a job separate from that. That job has positive and negative attributes. Sometimes it's an easy job. Sometimes it's a hard job. Sometimes the client's mean. Sometimes the client's nice. There's a lot to that. But every day they also interact with your company. From the day they get their offer letter to the day they quit or are fired, they are interacting with your company as an entity. And every one of those interactions has the ability to either make them love or hate your company more. And it's the little stuff that happens every day that's going to have the longest impact in your ability to retain good people and maintain a culture that's acceptable, that's going to keep people happy and motivated. One of these old quotes, I can't remember who it is, but it's something like motivation is like being clean. You have to do it every day. You can't just take a shower once and be like, okay, my people are motivated for the next year. It's not like that. And the interactions that your employees have with your companies are always opportunities to either push that relationship deeper or add more barriers between it. So my company designs the processes, or we focus on the processes that hopefully minimize both the employees' negative feelings and also minimizes the administrative time to make them something that you can do consistently.
Let's just break that down real concretely here. And I want to pull an example from your book. When you talk about the employee coming on and they're filling out their initial paperwork and it's insurance benefits and they're going through the paperwork and they have all the information they need, but they don't have their child's social security number. So they leave that blank. Walk us through what happens there.
So this is the example. It happens so many times. I seem to remember we did a study when we were working with paper applications and that kind of thing. And someone did 2,000 applications, paper apps, where they covered family coverage. And on them, something like 10% had major errors, such as a misspelled name or a missing social or an incorrect date of birth on a child on those. So that's like 200 out of 2,000. You may not have 2,000 employees, but it's still 10%'s a lot. What happens when these mistakes happen on paper is that normally the paper is first sent to some sort of HR department or the business owner. And if the business owner is on their game that day or that week, they get around and they look it over and they realize there's no social security number on there. So then they get to go back to the employee and the employee has to go, I need to ask my wife about that or my husband. We got to go look that up. And it moves back and forth. It takes time for the administrator, it takes time for the business owner, and it's already taking extra effort from the employee. But that's actually the good scenario that the business owner's on their game. Much more likely, you get the paperwork and you email that over to your benefits company.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm that I didn't look at it.
Yeah.
I just send it off. I'm like, okay, got it. I just need to push it through to the next person.
What's the total at the bottom? That looks good. Next, right? I mean, who's going to look at that? And then you go to an insurance company that has a minimum of a 14-day processing time frame, right? So they're going to take that piece of paper and some poor schmuck is going to go key that in somewhere into their electronic system. And they're going to catch it because they're going to be putting it into a computer system and it's going to go, there's no social. And if they're a good insurance company, they're going to send the paperwork back to you and say, we're missing the kid's social. And now it's going to go to the business owner. The business owner's going to have to look at the employee and go, hey, 2 weeks ago, you filled this paper out, but now we found out there's an error. Please fill this out. We're not going to be able to issue your coverage. That's the good scenario, though. Again, we've delayed insurance for 2 weeks. Not a good thing, but this is the better scenario because the much more likely scenario is that the insurance company is going to just issue the coverage, not covering the kid. You're not going to notice for another couple of weeks when your employee gets their card and it has their name, has their wife's name, and no kids listed. And maybe they'll go, I think kids are supposed to be listed. Or maybe they won't. And then it'll be a month later when they're at the doctor that the kid's not covered, right? So every one of these little steps, there's an opportunity for a human to intervene and cause problems right now, but at least it's better than the alternative. But a lot of times they don't. And the end result is something that feels catastrophic over such a basic error that's pretty easy to prevent. And everything's like that.
So right there, I've been the mom at the doctor and finding out your kid's not on this policy. And I'm like, what the frick? I thought they were. And it's just an administrative oversight like that. So I'm the psychologist. So I know from the employee's family standpoint, that is a ding against the employer. At that point, we're like, they screwed us up again. Why can't they get anything right? And you think it's the employer. You're not thinking it was just because of, somebody's oversight on some paperwork. It's blaming the employer. So that's a bad experience. And it's these culmination of these little bad experiences. So, John Gottman's work on marriage and relationships, he talks about, the ratio of positive to negative interactions that you need to have in a marriage. I actually think as an employer, we have a much bigger ratio that we need to be paying attention to. So you can have one negative interaction and you need to have probably 15 or 20 positive interactions to build that emotional bank account, because every little negative interaction is taking money or taking good positive vibes out of that emotional bank account for the employer-employee relationship.
Exactly. It's a microtransaction every time. And whether that's a benefits issue like we discussed, which is a big one. I mean, that's a big ding. That's a big withdrawal when that happens. Or just not quite sure what to do when you need to apply for paternity leave. Or I know I need to take time off in a month or 2 months. I'm giving more notice than usual. So how long does it take to get that approval and to know if I'm going to be able to take that off? I've got friends asking me every day if I'm going to be able to take this time off. And every time they're asking, and you're like, I'm still waiting to hear from my boss if I can take that time off. Every time that happens, there are all these little micro pains. Yeah.
Well, and the other part that you did such a nice job of pointing out in your book is what typically happens if they don't know the policy, they go to their coworker and ask the coworker what the policy is. Right. And so there's all this miscommunication around the simplest things that need to happen in a business. And what I'm so attuned to is that we work with business owners who typically have rapidly growing businesses. So they're scaling very quickly. My book is How to Hire the Best. So they're reaching out to me because they're like, I'm desperate. I need folks. Help. Get me some team members. And then, we put all this effort into getting them A-player team members, and then they get onboarded. And we dropped the ball all over the place with the onboarding system. So what really needs to happen, Rhamy, in the onboarding? What's the ideal scenario where a business owner really should be attending?
Well, I think there's two ways to think about it. One is the practical, you need to do these 4 steps, and we'll get into those in just a sec. But the other is a mental shift. When you bring on an employee, you've hired an awesome Dr. Sabrina to help you find somebody, or you've worked hard and interviewed hundreds and you've finally got somebody. I want you to equate that mentally in your business to bringing on a new client. The amount of time you spend thinking about smoothing out and creating the processes to consistently and effectively bring on a new client after a long sale is very similar to how you should think about bringing on a new employee. It's just a slight mental tweak. Your listeners are smart. They're listening to you. They know what it means to have consistent processes, and they know how to make things better and more effective iterations every few times. The problem is they're not applying it internally at all. And that's causing a huge drag on the overall business. So when it comes to onboarding, imagine that this new employee needs to be onboarded, orientated, brought into the company, just like this was a new, huge client. If you have 3 employees and you are hiring your 4th, you are bringing on a third of your business, 1 new employee. That should be an investment. Don't spend all the time making the sale and designing your product, and then when someone finally cuts you a check, send them a giant stack of paper in the mail and go, great, fill that out. We'll see you next Tuesday. You're good. You bought us. Don't do that. Actually onboard. So with an employee, the steps normally fall into a couple of broad categories. You need to gather information effectively and hopefully have that in such a system that allows it to be integrated and minimize your administrative investment. So you need to gather their W-4 and their I-9 and their direct deposit information and their emergency contact and their shirt size. And hopefully, if you're a developed company, those all flow into payroll, and you need to collect what kind of benefits or insurance they're going to get. And that needs to flow into the insurance companies. But even if that's more an integration issue, at the basic part of onboarding, you need to gather the information effectively. If you can have electronic controls, that's awesome because it's going to help remove those silly errors we talked about, like not putting your kid's date of birth or your kid's social security number. The most common error on paper forms, by the way, and I see this to this day, you put your hire date in your date of birth field or your date of birth in your hire date field, and you send that to an insurance company, or you put that into the system that reports a new hire to the state. You put in, hire date and you put in their date of birth, and that goes to the state new hire department. And they say, hey, you didn't tell us about this person. You hired him 35 years ago. You're late. It happens all the time. These very simple electronic controls, like, you don't hire people under the age of 4 years old, will save you a lot of time.
There might be some labor laws involved there, right?
But if you could build that in, man, you've just killed, that happens 1 out of 100 or 150 times. We've really saved some lives here.
But that's just an example right there of a simple thing that your system does and catches for folks. So they only have to enter this information one time. And it sounds like you have controls within your system that will detect if things are getting entered the wrong way, the date of birth and the date of hire and all that. That's getting picked up, isn't it?
Right. And same with things. And it's basic stuff. The right number of digits in the social security number and, address verification. Have them key in their own address so that you get it right, and then make sure that's accurate, an actual address. So when you mail W-2s, it's not going off into the ether. It's just little stuff. Onboarding is data gathering. That's one part of it. The second part is compliance, and we call that's often putting information to them, right? So that's handing them the employee handbook and making sure they sign it. That's non-disclosure agreements. That's non-compete agreements. That's safety concerns. There's a compliance piece that's really, I just want the legal paperwork signed. And in most organizations, you've done it. That's onboarding, right? It's like, get me some information and sign the paper. You have to take it a step further, and we call that training. So you then need to actually make it so that compliance paperwork means something. So if you're going to have a non-disclosure agreement, have the CEO or if you have an HR director or legal officer or whatever, whoever, the business owner, go, here's why you're signing this and here's what it means. Use your iPhone and take a video. It takes 1.5 minutes, and suddenly that's gone from a piece of paper that they have to maybe understand or read to, again, a touch point that you can actually make a positive that means something.
So your system prompts the business owner to create a video around this, because that's something, when we're in a growing business and we're just pushing the paperwork out, we're not stopping to think about, do we need to have a conversation with these new team members about why they're signing an NDA and all the different ways that could come up or the different scenarios where that could be a problem and things that they need to be thoughtful about. But now they'll be prompted, explain, get on video. And then you only have to do it once. You're not having to have this conversation with every new hire. It's once and done.
Right. And the same with your PTO policies, and the same with your FMLA or COBRA or anything that you want to put information out about from a compliance standpoint. Take a minute to make it a actual living thing, and it'll blow you away that people will stop asking about it. Like, they'll remember, oh, and a lot of this compliance stuff is expensive for the company, right? You have more than 20 employees. That means you have to offer COBRA benefits. That means if they leave, they get to keep their benefits for up to 18 months. They just have to pay the full price. Okay. It's in your handbook. It says it right there. That's something that costs your business money. Like, it's expensive in administration and time. If you can put that up front in onboarding, hey, guess what? You've actually gotten something from this cost that you have to spend one way or the other. You've actually put some time in. If you have a maternity leave policy, or a paternity leave policy for that matter, or adoption benefits, or any of those things, they're right there. You've already put the money out there. Spend a minute and a half talking about why you do that. We do that because we want you to grow your family. We want you to stay with us forever. And we know that means that you're going to go through many changes in your life. And every time that happens, we want to help and be there for you. That's why you get 2 weeks of maternity leave. No.
Oh, Rhamy. I took 9 weeks, and I really like to be generous with that. I'm kidding you.
No, I'm playing. Put the info out there. Yeah.
So that's such an important thing, because that's the business owner stopping to explain, we care about you. That's why we're providing these benefits. And there's the thought behind the benefit, because, really, I think most employees, when they get their paycheck, we're looking at the bottom.
Yeah.
And we're not thinking about all the other amount up above that amount at the bottom, and what the business owner's expense is for that paycheck. And there's a lot of benefits that make it very expensive to have. And we bring those benefits because we want to have the best team members possible. And so if we're just brushing over that in the onboarding process, wow, we're really missing some big opportunities to build that.
It's just a low return on investment. Absolutely.
Yeah, like, we're invested in you. Like, we want you to have a good life with us.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going to pause here for just a minute, because I want to get into some more of this with you, just about not just the onboarding process, but also the entire life cycle of employees with the business. But let's pause here and take a break and hear from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by my online course, How to Hire the Best. And in honor of our listeners who've been doing such a great job helping us pass this 1,000 download milestone, I'm going to offer a special savings. So if you need to hire team members in the coming 6 to 9 months, I want to give you the opportunity to jump into the How to Hire the Best course and learn all of my tips and strategies for how to do that easily. How do you attract A players to your business? And I'm giving you a code. Use code DESIGN to save 40% off your registration. Use that at tapthepotential.com/join. And we'll link to that in today's show notes. Our other sponsors include Contractor Business Solutions and the Small Business Consulting Group. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to learn more about our sponsors and to catch previous episodes of the podcast. And by the way, while you're there, be sure to check out the conversation between Mike and I that 95% of entrepreneurs never have. We blow up the dirtiest little secret in the entrepreneurial world. Okay, Rhamy. Now, we're going to get into the whole life cycle of team members with us here in a minute, but you were going through the critical steps that need to be attended to in onboarding, right. And I think we were on step 2. So what's the next one?
Well, we had covered gather information. That's step 1. Compliance 101. So get the things signed you need to get signed. And then on top of compliance information, you need to make it an actual useful investment. Use video, use actual attractive materials to explain why you do the things you do. And that leads very well into cultural communications, which is the key part of this. It's almost, you're already doing it. You're already explaining some of these more complicated documents they're signing. You're already showing your culture. But the final bit is really cultural communications. And that's diving into the very basic stuff, like where they go to work and what the office looks like and how to find the bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. so orientation, but you can do this all via video. My common recommendation is for the CEO or owner to make a video welcoming them to the organization, telling their story. Why did you start the company? Where has it come from? What do you do and why do you do it? And then have each department manager make 2 videos. One for if someone is joining their department, a dive into it. Same thing about them. This is where I came from, and here's why I run this department, and here's why this department matters, and here's what we're going to do in this department, and I can't wait to have you join our team. It can be generic. It doesn't have to say your new hire's name, but introduce the department head. And also have them make a secondary video that's a much simpler one, like, I'm Sally, I'm the head of the marketing department. I don't know where you're working, but at our department, what we care about is getting new leads into the company. We try to make sure we have constant new stuff. Come to me if you ever have somebody who you think would be a great fit in our department, or if you have a lead for us, we want to work with you. Come to us now. Right.
Oh my goodness. So that's a recruiting tool for more A players right there.
Of course, they come in and imagine that they do all this. They watch these videos. They see they meet the department heads, who does what. They learn about how they work. And then they go to work the first day and they know where everything is. And they've already met those people. Basically, each person in their chain of command needs to have a more in-depth video, but have some broad ones that help them understand the company.
Yeah, so they have a big picture overview of how they fit in. They know the different people in the different departments. They know who to go to with questions and why they would want to reach out to those people. But the other part is when you said, if you know somebody who would be a great fit in this department, tell them. Because that's for recruiting A players to the business. The time that a team member is going to be most excited about joining the business is in the first week of employment. So that's when they're most likely to tell everybody how wonderful of an employer you are. And if you've just done this wonderful video about all the benefits you provide, they're primed to be out there just telling everybody about you.
Right. And if you do this, and there's the coolest thing about video and about the new world of technology, this stuff, you put the investment in up front in terms of making your videos and structuring this out. But it's all distributed online and it's mobile accessible. 80% of our clients' employees are onboarded on a cell phone without ever touching a computer.
Oh, wow.
And we open this up from offer letter day. So it's something like 70% of employees, it depends on the organization and the industry, complete all of their data gathering, all of their paperwork, watch all their videos, introduced to the company culture, before they arrive on their first day.
That is something.
Now they're walking in first day and they know. And by the way, I have one more department head that absolutely, of course, everyone needs to do it, but HR, whoever's in charge of your people, this is the stopgap. We talked about there are these micro things, right? Things get better, things get worse, things get better every time they interact. HR should be focused on changing the processes around these interactions so that each one gets better over time, which means in theory, because they're working on the processes, they're not constantly interacting with the employees about little things. Employees shouldn't need to go to HR because they are late that day. There's not really an HR small disciplinary thing. It's all big stuff by the time HR gets involved. So HR should take this opportunity to really introduce themselves and tell them, here are the real things that when this happens or you feel this way, come to us. And that gives you an emergency stopgap that if someone really is just that upset with their boss, just that, ready to walk out the door and I'll go to work at McDonald's rather than work here. I just can't do it anymore. There's an intermediate step before they pull the trigger.
That is so important because it does. If a team member does not feel like they have anybody to talk to or anybody to help them figure out what to do, they'll just quit. Because what option do they have? So that knowing who that one person is in the process. Okay. So was there a fifth step? Or did I?
Well, I guess it all broadens out. So if you then want to talk about benefits, that can be a big part of your cultural communications. It can just be, it's a mixture of all of them, right? Benefits have a data gathering, a compliance, and a cultural information that you need to put out. But basically, you can think about those 3 steps: gather information, get the paperwork signed, and then communicate the culture in every piece of your onboarding. Whether that's explaining benefits, getting your compliance agreement signed, gathering information. You just kind of have to consider all 3 of those with every piece of interaction you have during onboarding.
So another experience in the life of an employee with a business is the annual review. That word strikes fear in every manager and business owner's heart to have to do an annual review. Oh my gosh. So you have some really great tips in your book, People Process, about how to handle these events in a much better way, much more effective way. So could you share a few of those with our listeners?
Sure. Well, just like onboarding, step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of thing to think about, and we'll come right back to that. But there's also a mindset to it. Performance reviews in modern organizations are very rarely about the employee's performance. If your company is one that has to wait a year to figure out whether an employee is doing a good job or not, you're not really in our target market. You got a lot of work to do long before you need to figure out how to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And in small businesses, you really know, right? You've got 5 employees, you know which one is sucking. There's no need to do a performance review. Is just a signal for you that you have to do something. And that's the problem with performance reviews. Most people view them as this managers and owners are going to sit down and judge their employee on information they already have and have had for a while, and they already know what they're going to say. And this is really just the time we have to tell them. That's what performance reviews are. Well, can be, but gosh, it sucks for the employee. It sucks for the managers. Business owners don't get anything out of it except perhaps a deadline to fire somebody, right? I mean, that's really all that comes out to. So that's not what we need. Performance reviews instead are about aligning the expectation of the employee with the goals of the business. So that's the key words.
That's alignment. Okay, got it.
Alignment. So performance reviews are about first gathering information, not telling employees things, learning from them. How do they view their performance, their compensation, the business's performance, the business's role for them in comparison to their peers or your competitors? What are they thinking? That's Performance Review 101. I think I'm doing a great job, and you pay me like crap. I could make more money somewhere else. If they write that down, or solicit it electronically, please, but whatever, if they fill it out that way, you now know something. The performance review is now, they think they're doing great, and they think we pay poorly. And now the step 2 of the performance review is, well, do we pay poorly? And are they doing really well? And then we realign those up, right? So performance reviews have a couple different steps in them, but the strategic thought is it's not about pushing information down to the employee about their behavior. It's about finding out what the employee thinks about both their behavior and the company, and then aligning that with what the company thinks about those things. Okay. So that's the strategic thought. And again, your business owners are smart. Your listeners are smart. If they can just think that way, I'm sure they'll figure out most of the performance review equation. But for those that need a little step by step, step 1, survey. What information are you trying to get? You're trying to get their opinion on their performance, their manager's performance, the company's performance, and their pay and benefits. That's 101. Okay. How you doing? What do you think?
Okay.
Step 2, analyze that stuff and figure out how accurate it is. They may be right. I've been in small businesses. I've run a small business. There are times where we have paid terribly, and they're right. Yeah. But you love us, right? Don't quit. That's the best I could do because that's the money I had. But you need to take a look and know where you stand.
So this is a question I get a lot from the business owners we work with. How do we know how what we're paying compares to what that employee could get elsewhere? How do we know if we're competitive?
So, well, you can hire my company. We can help you with that. Or go to salary.com. It's $200 a job to research it. Okay. So it's not free on there, but they will give you a report by job title, your company's industry, company size, and locale. And they'll give you a really nice, 8-page report that shows what the companies are spending on various pieces of their pay for that employee. And it gives you a starting point. Okay. If you're a small business, you will likely be underpaying compared to the industry average, even though the salary.com, you may say, I think the smallest division they have is fewer than 50 employees. There's a big difference between a 45-man company and a 5-man company.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or a 3-man. So if you're not really sure and you look and you don't pay, there may be times you can't pay as much as those. But I want you to understand that if you can't pay as much as those, it's not your employee's fault. It's that the employee isn't being utilized well. Because of the scale or the structure of your company, you can't get as much money out of every employee. Apple generates $473,000 per employee they have.
Oh my goodness.
Right? It's like, dang.
What are they doing?
Right? Yeah. Well, that's Apple, right? But
right.
It's like they make a lot of money per employee. They can pay their people pretty well. You may make $55,000 per employee. If that's the case, you don't have much room.
Yeah.
That's okay. But you need to know it. And for God's sakes, be honest about it.
And that just points to, what you do for businesses. You help them streamline their processes. You help streamline the HR process. And the more we're streamlining our businesses and automating things that, people are, instead of pushing paper, things are getting automated. That does create that opportunity to get more value out of the investment that you're making in a team member. And I think that's also the opportunity to have that conversation with the team member about all the intangible perks at the small business that they're experiencing.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So small businesses often are very family oriented, and there's good work-life balance. There's flexibility. If you need to take time off to go to your kid's baseball game, a lot of times you have the opportunity for that, where you wouldn't have that in a larger corporation necessarily. I think another intangible perk, just to help our listeners with this, because I know we have so many who are in small business and they're thinking, I can't pay, I've got to do something here, is that in a small business, you have the opportunity to advance into higher and higher levels of the organization much faster than you would in a corporation, because especially if it's a rapidly growing small business, you can come in at entry level, and in 2 years' time, you might be a division manager or an executive in that small business, quite honestly, depending on.
And even that entry level position gets to do so much more. Man, there's very little in small businesses that are like, come in and do the same thing 35,000 times today. You don't have those jobs in small business a lot of times. So that's a huge advantage to stress as well.
So let's talk about the one area that most small business owners hate to think about, and that's when an employee leaves, either through termination or just a voluntary exit from the business. What are some things that should be happening at that point of contact that often get overlooked?
I think with offboarding, you have to, again, mental shift. It should be just as bad for an employee to leave your company as a similarly sized by percentage client to leave your company. It should cause very similar thoughts. I think in most cases when employees quit, 99% of the time, small business owners and big business owners go, poor Fit. She sucked. I'm glad she's gone. I was going to have to fire her anyway. Very rarely will they go, oh, I'm so sad that person's gone. What are we going to do? And even then they think about replacing them, right? They don't think about what did they do that caused that loss. Whereas if you have 10 employees and you lose an employee, think about how you would act if you had 10 clients and one of them left. They said, I'm quitting. I'm going to your competitor. Or I'm quitting and I'm just not going to use a whatever service ever again. I don't need one. You would immediately, as a business owner, think back and go, where did we go wrong in our promises, in our processes, in how we interacted with this client over time that we've messed up? Maybe we just charged too much. With an employee, maybe you honestly, sometimes you just can't pay enough and that's part of it. But most of the time, there are interactions along the way that you can then go back and make better. So offboarding is the number one opportunity to learn what you've done wrong through an exit interview, which we'll get to in just a sec, and then make improvements to the processes for employees along the way. It's the capstone of the people processes because you have to have something that you then iterate on. So when an employee leaves, that's your best opportunity to really find out what's working and what's not. Then you can go back and adjust your processes so that other employees don't have that same mistake. Just like with a new client. If a client leaves, if you could figure out why they left and you can fix that for your clients, hey, you won't have clients leave for that reason anymore.
So it's a learning opportunity.
It's a learning opportunity.
To pause and look at what we can learn and where we have some problems in our people processes, because that's typically where it originates from, is a people process. So, Rhamy, when is the right time for a business owner to start paying attention to their people process?
I think it's something to pay attention to from the beginning. I mean, to think about from the very beginning. Your return on investment in terms of scaling things like video and those kind of pieces, those obviously happen the more people you hire. So if you're hiring one human a year, probably don't necessarily need to create an online mobile environment that reaches people everywhere, that structures all this, that, gives you a consistent and effective way of handling new hires. It's not a bad thing, but I know when I was hiring one person a year, I had more things I needed to spend my time and money on. But once you start getting to one person a quarter, something like that, right? Because they're expensive. Every employee is really expensive, right? So if you start getting to where you have 2, 3, 4 new hires a year, I would think really getting that onboarding process right is a super worthwhile investment.
Okay. So 1 per quarter is the time to start looking.
I think that it would be the latest time to start. It also, if you have, that's for onboarding, right? But there are other occasions. We have some clients. I have a client who's got 65 employees. They hire a person a year. They don't hire people. They don't lose people, man. They are average age is like 59. They have just had the same staff in 1984 as they do now. That's how they work.
They must be a great place to work. I need to interview them.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think there are 2 things to think about. Yes, low turnover is good. Always a good sign. No turnover is a bad thing. That means you're not changing anything. So actually a lot of companies bring us on. Our business works with a lot of nonprofits. It's actually about 70% of our revenue. We love nonprofits. It's just the niche that I've always been in. And sometimes in those, you get truly stagnant organizations. We're doing it the same way we've been doing it for 30 years. And if you go in there and update things and make things new, you're going to lose some people. And it's not a bad thing. If you're not growing, then you're not. So I had a conversation with the CEO of a big healthcare company once 4 or 5 years ago. I was really proud that in 6 years in my company, we had not lost a single client. Every client who came on stuck with us forever. I was very proud of that. And I am still proud of it. It's still a tiny fraction. It's like 98% we keep now. But industry average is about 87%. So I was pretty happy. The 98 is still good. But I was ecstatic with my 100%. And he told me, you're doing something wrong. This is a note for your business owners out there. If you're keeping every client, just like if you're keeping every employee, that's a problem too. It means that you're not growing, forcing yourself to be profitable. You're not forcing yourself to create structure, that you're doing everything that everyone wants all the time. And that's
you're a people pleaser.
Yeah, that's not going to work for you. You're not going to grow that way.
Right.
So just a side note.
Oh, that's
high turnover is bad. No turnover is bad too.
Yeah. Okay. So we know when we should start looking at the people processes. Now, why would a business owner want to come and bring on your services? What benefit do you provide in the solutions that you provide?
Well, my company is called Poplar Financial. We've been in business 9 years now. We work in all 50 states, and we are an HR company that does payroll, benefits, and HR systems. We provide the structure so that you can develop out those systems with our advice to create automated but very effective ways of handling your employees. So you need a payroll platform. You got to have someone do your payroll. If you have us do your payroll, well, that's going to integrate into your onboarding platform really well. It's going to integrate into your benefits platform so that when employees get married, we're going to make sure that their spouse is covered and it's all going to flow through into payroll. The communications around benefits and that kind of world we handle. So we'll make videos and we make the benefits very attractive and pretty. That's really the origin of this, the realization that good benefits communicated well are actually much better than great benefits that are communicated poorly. So that was the start of a lot of this, was creating good communications around benefits. And what we'll do is we could put together packages that basically contain benefits if you want them, payroll if you want them, automation of HR services, HR consulting in a very structured way of developing handbooks and writing the kind of compliancy stuff. If you just don't know where to start with that.
You help business owners with that. I think we have some listeners who are going to be contacting you because that's a big question we get. Who can I get to help me with this?
Easy. You ask us questions. We help you define it. We build it out for you. And again, everything we do and there's plenty of companies out there that'll write your handbook. The difference with us is it's about processes. We don't help you write your handbook. We help you write a handbook, and then we monitor every section of your handbook every day and generate updates. And then you go in our platform. Again, it's about systems. So you go in our platform, and it's going to say, hey, your policy on arbitration in Oklahoma, this is your old language. This is the new language we recommend. Click accept. You click accept, you've got version 1.01 of your handbook. ready for distribution. So we try to make it, everything we do is around this idea of there's some investment up front in terms of your time to set it up, but then we're as a company trying to maintain the processes so that you can just focus on improving processes, that you can focus on making them better. Ours is to take the rote and repetitive stuff off your desk.
Right. Well, and that's such a big deal in these rapidly growing companies, because if you change one part of your system, you have to make sure that it's handled all the way throughout, and it causes this domino effect. So what you're doing is monitoring that, and you've created a very simple, streamlined way for that to get handled, and the business owner doesn't have to worry about it. They can just focus on improvement.
This made me think of a story. My wife and I have a house. We lived in it now for 4 years, and my wife's a green thumb. She loves to tend the garden. She's a planting flowers, and most Saturdays she goes to the botanic arborist, something another, where there's a class on how to plant things. I'm not a green thumb or even an outdoor person really at all, but she is, and she loves it. And all of this time she would put into these things. She asked me, we talked about it, and we allocated a budget, and every 2 weeks now we have somebody come out and he does the lawn and they do the weeding in the gardening. And I was like, Liz, you spend 2 hours out there every day. Why do you need, we can do it, but why? I thought you said you love gardening. She says, I love gardening. I love creating. But if I have to spend an hour every day maintaining what I have, by the time I'm done with that, there's no improvement that's going to happen. I'm just done. Right? And that's how we do for your business on the HR side. We're going to try and handle the maintenance and set up structures so that you can work on making it prettier and better. And we'll keep the everyday stuff going.
That is a beautiful analogy, because I know as a business owner, the maintenance of systems sucks the life right out of me. And when I get to work on creating and innovating and improving things, that's where I'm in my zone. That's the fun stuff. And, you doing that for these business owners really frees them up to continue growing the business.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So, Rhamy, what strategic initiatives are you working on in the next 6 months?
Well, internally, our company is moving down market. We started with large companies and larger companies, and we're learning about the small business market. My book came out September 11th, so it hadn't really been that long. And a large part of that was to start moving these big company ideas down into small market. From a company perspective, we're not really built out to market to every small business in the world. We just don't. We're nationwide. I can't do direct mail. I don't have an ADP workforce to bother everybody on their cell phone twice a week. I'm just not going to do that. So my strategic goal personally is to find business owners, CPAs, bookkeepers, and business coaches who work in that small market who want to partner with us. And we've set up a partnership program for them so that we can work with those coaches and bookkeepers and CPAs to extend our products and services to their clients. So that's what I'm really focusing on over the next 6 months.
Okay,
just working with those people.
So profit designers, I know we have a lot of accountants and bookkeepers and business coaches who are listening. So Rhamy is your man. He wants to connect with you, and he wants to be able to help you with what you're doing for your clients. So this is a resource that you could be bringing to your clients that's added value to what you're doing for them. So, and Rhamy, you also have a gift for our listeners, whether they're the business owner themselves or the CPA or the bookkeeper or the business coach. What's the gift that you have?
Yeah, well, my book, People Processes, was the #1 Amazon bestseller in HR.
Woohoo!
And #1 new release for a while, but the #1 bestseller we're really excited about. And we've decided for listeners of your podcast, if they want to go to peopleprocesses.com/design, they drop me a name and an email address, and I'm going to send them a link to get the book for 99 cents.
Oh,
and for the first 15 people, we're just going to give them a copy of the book for free.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Cool. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, we want to get them over too. So we're super excited about that. And again, if this is your business, awesome. Run with it. If you need our help, let us know. If you're a bookkeeper, CPA, or business coach and want to talk about partnering, I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach me at Rhamy@Poplar Financial. That's my email. I monitor it. I'd love to hear from you. RHAM as in Mary, Y@poplarfinancial.com, or grab that copy of the book at peopleprocesses.com/design, and I'll absolutely reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So in a shout out about this book, Rhamy has some excellent pointers in there about just all the things that we forget to pay attention to when it comes to dealing with team members, all the subtle things that we really need to be paying attention to. So it's an excellent resource. I see myself recommending this book over and over, Rhamy. And I am going to be going on Amazon to get you a review because I know those book reviews on Amazon are so important, especially
so important
when you have a new book out. So, and listeners, if you're getting Rhamy's book and you find value, please leave him a review because that's going to help him a lot too.
Oh, I love you, Dr. Sabrina. Thank you.
Well, Rhamy,
it's like, oh, Amazon review, please.
Yeah, please give me an Amazon review. No, it's a wonderful thing. I so appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, Rhamy. And I think you've really opened our profit designers' eyes to some things they may not have been paying attention to in their business.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabrina, for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group. Share your thoughts on today's episode, ask us questions, and let us know what you want to hear about next. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to access resources from our sponsors and tools we've created for you. Subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening to right now. There's a subscribe button right there. Go ahead and hit it so that you always get a notification when we release a new episode. And finally, share our podcast with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. Thanks again for listening. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this.